Real quick, before we get started, I want to give a shout out to the sponsor of this podcast, Greenlight.ai. We all know how important compliance is, and Greenlight.ai is the leader for compliance and EOR services, especially for talent platforms. You're going to hear about them later, but thank you to Greenlight. So, okay, listeners, we didn't know this before I hit record. But Bruce, when I get with my friends over the weekend, usually I wake up with a hangover, and like plans for brunch. And Bruce decided to just start a whole company. So, Tony, when you hang out with your friends, do you like just go build a whole new company, or what do your friend weekends look like?
Sometimes I hang out with you when we're building a company. So
that's true. That's true.
We've gotten together in Atlanta and worked on a couple. So it's always a lot of fun when you have friends that you can do that with, right?
Absolutely. Well, I read yesterday that there were 26 million people phoning in to work with Super Bowl flu.
Yeah. Most called. It needs to be a Saturday or Monday needs to be a holiday.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
They do that. And it was kind of weird. Did you guys notice it was during the daytime and it just felt kind of off, especially the halftime show where it was like, poor guy, like it just feels like it's noon on a Sunday and we're all kind of just having a picnic.
It's in San Diego. Whenever it's on the West Coast, it always feels a little bit weird when we're on the East Coast watching, but yeah. Nice. All right. Well, Bruce, besides you hung out with your friends and this is for us breaking news highlight. You put together a consult. Tell us a little bit about what led to what you put together and then what you put together now.
Yeah, so the quick backstory. So when I was at AGS, my previous boss, Chad Lane, was president of the organization. He's been out of there for a couple of years now. And so when I retired from Allegis at the end of 2024, it was natural for Chad and I just to do some work together. So we've been doing a few projects here and there together. And then more recently, through Grant, that I think a lot of the listeners will know, Andrew and I have been working together for nearly 30 years. And latterly, he set up and founded for the last 4.5 years, Quantum Work, inside the Allegis Group of Families. And he finally made that decision to go out on his own. So we've been the last couple of months thinking about how do we collaborate more together and, keep some autonomy, but also come together to create some magic, hopefully. And so in fact, it was the start of the year. We said, well, let's just put a date on the calendar where we get together. Chad's in Maryland, Andrew's out of London. And he said, well, where's a good place? I said, well, let's go South Florida because then we can guarantee the weather.
Yeah.
And somehow I chose Fort Myers. Never been there before.
Really?
So anyway, the three of us, I actually flew in from Phoenix, but the three of us flew into Fort Myers for the weekend. But as soon as we planned it, we suddenly realized, it's Super Bowl weekend. That's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So we got up very early Sunday morning and worked all the way through to kickoff. And then a few hours on Monday and the company was born. So the organization is called Growth Capital. Capital is a play on the words of human capital, financial capital, and intellectual capital. So that's what we're looking to bring to organizations. But the core of all of that around growth. Any organization that is in hyper-growth mode, that's our sweet spot really to help them do that. In and around the ecosystem of the wonderful world of work. So whether that's from, startups, software, HR tech companies looking to grow, looking to understand how do they navigate their way through that ecosystem, through to large enterprises who are looking to grow their organization and how they get work done and not sure where to put it. I think that I've just come back from India and, the growth of GCCs is not slowing down. If anything, it's there's 3 a week opening in India alone. So that's, an element, if you're a CHRO or a board of an enterprise, how do you think about getting work done? Where the hell do I put this stuff? Should I be using freelancers, contractors, employees? What's AI going to do for me? My hair's on fire. And with our combined 100+ years of experience between the three of us, we think we have a lot to add in terms of helping companies do that. So yeah, super excited. about getting that going. And we already have a few clients because we bought to the party to, individually. So we're off to the races. So anyway, I was very excited when I looked at my calendar this morning and see we were recording this. I'm like, those are the guys I want to tell first.
Well, we're excited to be talking about this because that we see it all the time. We work with a lot of marketplaces that are relatively small, founder led. They're either growing and they're struggling with how to manage the growth, or they're not growing as much as they'd like, and they're trying to figure out, how do I boost? I feel like I've got all the right pieces, but I need to figure out how to boost my growth. What kind of growth challenges do you feel like are the most pressing for marketplaces in particular, or startups?
Yeah, that's I think the most common, not mistake, but the most common falter, let's call it, I think, is when organizations, depending on their background, where they've come from, because most of these startups, they've had a stint somewhere, Google or Amazon or something, but they've had a stint somewhere. And if they were in enterprise sales there, then they'll bring that expertise with them. And then well, how do we set up a partnership strategy? And what does that really mean? And who are they? And who are the right partners to choose? And conversely, people that have only been, if they've come out of the SaaS world or something and they've lived and breathed partnerships all their life, they're like, how do we get to these enterprises? Who should I be talking to?
Yeah.
And what we tend to see, if you track these companies, the ones that take longer, the ones that take too much time to sort that out, they're either trying to do everything and they end up kissing an awful lot of frogs to find the princess. And we can say, no, you don't need to do that. Don't worry, we've been there. We've made those mistakes for you. Do not waste your time. You'll have, I'll give a bad example, but, you can speak to all the MSPs. Guess what? They're not interested. Yeah, but look, all that spend on the management. Yeah, but you don't quite fit into their world. You're not really adding value to them or the client. You think you are in your head, but that's because you write the code. So I think helping people navigate around that and getting them back on the right track, I think, is a big piece of it.
Can I ask you, Bruce, the funniest question, and Tony, because here's where you have such a unique visibility, perspective, you name it. And Tony, keep me honest here, but a lot of the questions we get from marketplaces is, why should I care about, and they would even say, your industry? And there's this general feeling, right, of like, hey, I'm not in staffing or contingent or HR, like I'm in tech, or I'm in PR, or I'm in marketing or media. And so we get a lot of CEOs of these incredible talent marketplaces. But when we bring them to things like SIA, or we bring up stuff like that, they just look at us and they're like, I don't even want to think about that. Yet Tony and I know that this space is actually huge and that there is a pretty small ceiling if you don't get into this side of the world. So, Bruce, How would you explain yourself, this industry, this ecosystem that you swim in? And also just know that you're going to be getting a lot of people on the other end listening right now going, no, I'm the best in marketing. I'm the best in tech and developers, yet they need to come into your world.
Yeah, I think kind of thing. One is that, thank heavens, we're still a people business. And, that's why I love the industry for the last 45 years, is because even with your competitors, they become your best friends. We all hang out at the bar together, conferences and things. And because we are in the people business, that's what we do for a living, is put people to work. So I think it's pretty unique in that perspective, that's the great thing, but it can be hard for new people trying to get into that world. If they don't talk the language, they don't talk the lingo, how do they get into conversation? And it's almost like, go back to school or college days, there were certain cliques. You're going to hang out with the goths or the cool guys or the hot chicks, I don't know, however they do them in these rom-com movies, you got to pick your group. And you literally see it at conferences. I remember, and I'm going to try and keep this anonymous, but some people might work out who I'm speaking about. Never mind. So I was at a CWS, I think it was a CWS, and I'm hanging out with a bunch of guys at the bar, and then I look over across the room, and there's somebody else holding court the other side of the room that wasn't from our industry, but spending a lot of money, and it got into the space, and so on and so forth. And it was interesting watching the dynamics of, in my head, I'm like, those 3 or 4 people that speak to, I want them in my group because we're having more fun over here because we're taking the human element from it, and we're not just geeking out on the tech. We're actually understanding it's people's lives that we're impacting here. So I think that's a hard barrier to entry for people that, are just used to nerding out on the tech and not actually the outcomes of it. So I think that's one. And the other is that right now we're seeing what I love calling the race to be the orchestrator. So in the large enterprises, whether you're a VMS or an MSP or whatever you are, how do you go up the value chain for an enterprise client to make those decisions on how to get work done and how to be the orchestrator? And I truly believe those will be the winners of the future that are having those conversations around advising companies, here's how you should get that work done. I think we're definitely seeing it within the consulting shops now. I think, people that are in that world, I think they're excited about the prospect now that they can more and more influence how to get work done. I think the negativity around the consulting shops now is, I read an article the other day, they're just, sophisticated software salespeople. Right? They'll come in and charge you a fortune, but guess what these solutions are going to be? It's going to be some tech.
Yeah.
That they happen to have a partnership with, if you're facetious. So I think, but, they're in the perfect spot, especially for large global organizations, to say, we've got the expertise. We can come and look under the hood for you, really dissect how you're getting work done and give you some advice on what should be done by AI, what should be offshored, et cetera, et cetera. So I think my hope and dreams are that our industry doesn't just give that up to the consulting shops. I think that, we're in the right position from a knowledge and experience perspective to be advising those enterprises. But our industry, for some reason, we struggle to get into the boardroom. We don't have the right logo to do that because they're like, oh, you're a staffing company. Oh, you're an MSP. Oh, you're a VMS. So there's that dichotomy, and I just hope that our industry really does step up to the plate because there's a tremendous opportunity right now to really help influence that.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's particularly, of course we agree, because we were trying to sit at this kind of nucleus center of all this activity that's happening between flexible work, staffing, full-time. And we still see a lot of the challenge around just getting enterprises to adopt alternative staffing methods, flexible work in general. But we see that softening. It's been taking a while. And the first question is always, well, when do we use one or the other? And to me, it requires a much different conversation than the traditional, well, give me the job description and I'll go find this kind of talent. You have to think about, the longevity of the talent, the longevity of the projects, how much do you really need this skill versus experience? And how do you see that changing in terms of being more open to having multiple levers within the ecosystem versus kind of the tried and true traditional?
Yeah, I think, again, it's up to our industry to step up and be the experts in that and actually stand by your conviction. Of an example would be having a conversation with CHRO and say, hey, look, this 20% of all the work that needs to be done, that's 100% need to be employees. Let me explain why they should. Over here, you've got 20% that absolutely should be freelance, independent contractor, you're paying on outcome, et cetera. The challenge we've got is this 60% in the middle. That could be either or. And then you throw the AI layer over that. But having that type of conversation to educate the client, say, okay, now I get, okay, well, let's have a conversation about the 60%. How do I make those decisions? Well, then it gets into a deconstruction conversation. Because, to deconstruct the work into tasks, and then task by task, it's much easier. Can this purely be done by AI 100%? Is it a human being augmented with AI, or is it purely human-centric? Let's start putting those tasks into these buckets and say, okay, now we're starting to get the bones of a workforce plan here. And the more you talk about deconstruction, you're then fractionalizing the work into tasks. So as a leader looking at that and thinking, well, why the heck would I employ somebody to do a fractional task? How do I get a fractional person to do a fractional task. Oh, I increased the number of contractors I have or freelancers compared to my employees. So the more we have that conversation around fractionalization, the more, I think it'll help organizations get there and why it makes sense. And then, if you lay on top of that all the data around this, but guess what? This is what humans want to do now. Not all of them, but we've got kids coming out of college now that are going straight into contracting, right?
Absolutely. More than 50% straight out of college into a myriad of contract roles, and because they want to own and navigate their own career, and they kind of want to spread, they don't want to put their eggs in multiple baskets. But I love the point you made about the deconstruction. It's opportunity to plug one of my favorite books in this space, Work Without Jobs, because it's all about deconstructing the work, getting to those tasks. And when you can have that conversation, I think an important light bulb that goes off for executives is what you just mentioned. Wait, why would I get a full-time person to do this fractional work? And then hopefully they immediately go, whoa, I'm paying way too much. Like, I'm wasting all this energy and time. I just need this much. The rest of their time, they're networking and they're figuring out the office politics, and they're not just focused on the deliverables. How do I get more of the work focused on the outcome? It requires that kind of thinking. I think the challenge is it's just so easy to take the old job description, post that and get the body, and then throw them whatever comes up, versus really take a step back and rethink your whole work, resourcing methodology. But doing that has tremendous scale and tremendous opportunity for maximum ROI, and engaging and disengaging skills just as you need them, not, indefinitely under this idea of talent acquisition, as opposed to just, I like to call it talent access. Like, you just need to be able to access the talent you need when you need it. And then don't worry about what they're doing the rest of the time. If they're there when you need them, you can get the work done and move on. That feels like it's been hard for enterprises to embrace that.
Well, it has. And unfortunately, the last couple of years, our industry got distracted with skills-based. That's the new thing. That's the nirvana. Oh, okay. We're going to look at this. We're going to change it to skills-based hiring, and it's going to solve all of our problems. No. It's a tiny piece of the puzzle. Tiny piece of the puzzle. Hopefully, it's made us smarter identifying those skills and actually thinking about the work in that way. But if you haven't deconstructed the work, and then this is a mismatch when you're hiring on skills based. And the other thing I would say is that, in 1980s, I was presenting a SAA to a large audience and the human capital industry, HCI, saying, who wants to go home this weekend and tell their kids they're in Hollywood, they're in the movie business. Every hand, yeah, I'd love to. Okay. You need to think differently. Watch every movie you watch. Don't leave the cinema early. That's when people used to go to the movies, When you're watching Netflix, don't automatically flick to the next thing. Just look at all those people that are in that movie. Every single one of them, apart from a handful, is a contractor. That's the way the movie industry has always worked, because it doesn't make sense having somebody sat there waiting for the next thing. And you'll also learn some very unusual job titles if you do that, best boy and all this sort of stuff. I don't know what they do, but anyway. My wife grew up in Hollywood, and she was an actress in the early days. So, she makes me read all those names because she knows some of them. But that's, if an organization thought that way, projectize everything and then fractionalize it, what's the best way of getting that done? Bring a group of people together, make some magic, and move on.
Yeah. I couldn't be more aligned. That's also something I would use a lot, is walking them through the evolution of the Hollywood model, where back in the old days, studios would hire all their actors, hire all their staff, and they just make movies with the same people all the time. Then as TV started to become popular and they had to have these short format, do things on smaller budgets, they started just bringing people in for whatever that project was and letting them go. And then the Hollywood model was born, and you see these actors, they work for any different studio, and the people that do the editing only come in for the editing piece, and then they're gone and they go edit somewhere else. That model is old. It's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
Enterprises feel like, well, that works for them, not for us, but it's still the same thing. It's still work. And it's still, just like you said earlier, deconstructing the work, resourcing it as needed, and then bringing it back, accessing it later when you need it again, and just running that model, and always bringing in new skill sets. So when new technology comes out, you don't necessarily need to hire a full-time person that understands this technology, because you don't even understand it. You don't know how long you need it. You don't know how you're going to use it. But can you borrow it? Can you essentially rent it? Absolutely, and you should, so that then you can figure out, what it means for your business. I love that example.
And it goes back even further than that. I remember going to my grandmother's house when I was a little boy, sitting at the kitchen table, and she sat there making matchboxes. That was her side job. And she was paid per matchbox. They called it peacetime in the UK. I don't know what they call it in America, but you were paid per piece. So when I grew up in the country and I'd be out going picking strawberries, they don't pay you by the hour. They come back and you weigh your punnets and you get paid for that, as much as you can eat when they're not watching. So you're paid on you're paid on the outcome. Wow, look how magnificent we were back in the day. I was a contractor when I was 8 years old picking strawberries, but there's no way you'd pay an 8-year-old kid by the hour.
Bruce, I love that. I had the same experience. I used to get up in the morning, ride my bike to the local farm market, and go out and ride the trailer out to the strawberry fields and pick. And I remember it was my first real job, and I would get paid $3.50 per tray, which is really it's 8 quarts. But you had to fill up all the strawberries all the way up to the handle, and then they check it out and be like, okay, yep. And I remember thinking, okay, I just have to pick 2 trays per hour, and I'm making $7 an hour, which felt like a ton of money because I was a little kid. I was like 11. And what a great experience. But same thing, piece rate. I was thinking about, okay, I just got to make sure you don't have time to sit and eat strawberries if you're trying to hit your hour, your outcomes.
I hope you didn't put any stones at the bottom of the basket. That was an old trick.
All right, now you're giving away all the secrets.
Yeah, I need proof of this, Tony. I don't believe this for a second.
I
don't believe this for an absolute second.
Just drenched, like, because the fields are like dewy, so you come home and you're just soaked in like strawberry. I mean, I like strawberries. Okay, I couldn't get myself in the field now. I did that every summer or whatever the season was for years, and then I just went to work as a cashier in the same farm.
I
love this piece rate discussion.
You know what I represent, Tony? So this is actually funny when we look at like, when did it flip? So when I tried to be you two, and I went literally to my local farm and I was like, hey, I want a job. And they were like, okay, cool. Like, here's a, whatever you call it, here's an apron, and like, go sell. And I'm like, no, I don't want a job there. I want to be there. And I pointed to the fields, and they were like, no, you don't. And I'm like, yeah, I want that job. They're like, what do you want to do? I was like, I want to haul hay. I want to pick the strawberries. And they were like, you can't do that. And then guess why? Because they didn't want to get sued. And so literally they were like, look out there, look who's doing that. They can't sue us. You can sue us, and your parents will. And so I kind of represent what I think happened with work, right? Like, and that was the scary technical reason of like, oh, okay, you literally can't hire me, because then you're probably going to get sued if, God forbid, I get hurt. And then things are going to come out that, oh no, there's a high schooler working the field. That's so bad. But so I represent where I think work went a little astray in terms of, you guys were working based off outcome in a contract way. And I kind of represented no, go in the office, work per hour, totally decouple your outcome from what we pay you. And we said here,
Matt. Yeah, that was a great way to kind of pull it all together, because even when we're talking about enterprises now, what's one of their biggest hangups? It's compliance. They see Workday or whatever, they see these big, classification lawsuits or whatever, or AI lawsuits, and they're like, hey, that's scary. I don't want that risk. Let's wait. Let's avoid it altogether, which I think we all know, hey, that's a mistake. There's ways to mitigate that risk. You just have to take the time to understand the space that you're working with. And probably more importantly, to find experts that already understand it to guide you. And it sounds like, Bruce, that's exactly the kind of organization you and your buddies have put together.
Yeah.
And let us help you navigate this really valuable, this really important way of leveraging talent in a new way that is the way of the future. And like you mentioned earlier, it's the way that people are choosing. So your traditional workforce is drying up while this one's growing. We can help you navigate it and mitigate those compliance risks so that you can do it the right way without just waiting until it's too late.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Hey, everyone, real quick, I want to talk about the risk that is involved with an independent workforce. No matter where you are, whether it's the US, whether it's Brazil, whether it's the EU, whether it's London, there is risk in how you classify and how you work with individuals. Unfortunately, it's not as easy as just paying someone. The classification, the actual collaboration, the contracts, the payments, everything is intertwined and must be connected in a way that doesn't get you in trouble with the tax authorities, regulatory authorities, and even potentially class action lawsuits. There are numerous examples of this. Just search classification lawsuit and you'll get plenty. Which is why today's sponsor, Greenlight.ai, is the modern EOR, modern compliance solution for the modern workforce. There's 4 things that we want to call out when hiring an independent worker that you need. And that is, you need to onboard, you need to classify, you need to send payments, and you need to manage this global workforce. It's more than just one person, and Greenlight has all of that covered. All right, I want you to head over to greenlight.ai and tell them Human Cloud sent you.
When you think of what you and your partners have put together, what are some great use cases that come to mind, or maybe that you discuss, so that our listeners are like, okay, I'm intrigued, but how do I apply this? What do I have to be experiencing to be like, this is when you call Bruce and his team? And
I think it's number of things. One is from a tech perspective, if they're a startup in that point, that it's technical guys that have created, they've written the code, they're passionate about that, but really understanding how do you turn that into a value prop? What problems are we really solving? Make sure that we're not trying to find, the hammer for the nail and nail for the hammer type concept. How do we really think about what are the right channels for us? Where should we be investing our time? Even, planning around what type of BD person should be on the street for me. Because our industry right now, I've never seen so many people with open to work on the LinkedIn profile that we've seen now at a relatively senior level. So, even that can be incredibly intimidating for an organization that's trying to grow. Not that we're getting into the world of recruitment, but getting into the world of the type of skills they should be looking for. And also, what is the language that you use? So I was talking, we were chatting over the weekend, an example in the EOR, AOR payment space, and, an organization that we've been in conversation with, and they were selling the benefits of their solution that benefit them, not that benefit the MSP. And we had tough conversations with them saying, guess what? The MSP doesn't care about your product. How is it really going to add value to them? Is it going to make them stickier? Is it going to give them an edge over another MSP player? Is it purely about the revenue? But if it's about the revenue, speaking their language. This example, they were talking about the percentage fee split of what they were charging. Well, that means nothing to an MSP. Convert that to spend on the management and saying, well, typical MSP fee these days, unfortunately, is about, 1.5%, 1.4%. What if we could give you 0.3% on top of that? Oh, hang on a minute. Whoa, that's 30% of what I currently charge on top. Now I'm interested. And that sounds relatively simple, but it's unless you're in our world, the crazy world we live in with all these different pricing models, it's hard to understand what's going to get their attention. One thing we're not doing, which is probably just as interesting in a way, is, the 3 of us have come out of Allegis, and we will not do any work for any competitor of Allegis. We just wouldn't do that. And I just sort of made that point so people don't think, oh, I can, because one of the largest number of calls I have per week is, can you help me get into an Allegis program? I'm a nice guy and I try and help out and I always give advice, but I it doesn't work that way, as you know. The industry doesn't work that way. You can help them, guide them, and say, well, here's who you should be speaking to, and here's what you might want to say to them. But what we don't want to just get paid for who we know, I guess is the crass way of saying that.
Yeah. Which, Bruce, let me ask you at first a simple question, but I'll put a little wrap around it. And that is like literally where do you see the world of work as well as companies going? And I'll sort of preface it by kind of summarizing what I think is one of the key themes that we always talk about in this pod, Tony, which is like, hey, like HR should be, how'd you put it in one of our episodes, Tony? You were like, it should be the, how'd you consolidary?
Oh, the consigliere, yeah.
It should be the consigliere, right? Where it's like trusted advisor. Yeah. So, and I think this is where, and I'll tell you, Bruce, what I always have to grapple with in this industry is I started in like Silicon Valley, then Microsoft. And so I'm expecting that like sexy tech fix. And usually there isn't, right? And it's usually a talent problem. And then talent problem usually equals conversation and relationship. And so the tech brain to me is always just like, go, no, this, whatever. But so when kind of, to me, what I've heard both of you say so far is like, hey, the actual way we've ran work is coming up to a head, right? And I think we all experienced that. Layoffs, what we've seen with automation, like we're starting to feel its head. With that said, there's a model that had worked prior, which was outcome based. And your example of the strawberry farm, of like, we're not reinventing anything. We're actually just saying, hey, there's a model that was here prior. And then for some reason, something happened where I wasn't allowed to work on the farm. I had to work in the shop floor for an hourly wage, totally wasting their money. And now I think technology's created this environment where it's like, hey, we're going back to some of the things that already worked, and not to plug, Human Cloud too much, but like all of the marketplaces that are on our platform, Bruce, they're exactly what you're talking about. They're outcome based. They help you scope the work so that if it is hourly or outcome based, they help you figure it out. And I'm sitting here being like, why isn't it already that way, not this old way? But for you, what are you foreseeing over the next year, 2 years? Where's the growth happening? Where's not growth happening? What's your world of Bruce?
Yeah, I think what's happening is, and it's almost happened by accident, but it's going to be a good thing of our industry, is that more and more of the contingent labor ownership responsibility is sitting with HR. So, if you go back decade, you'd go to a contingent workforce strategy meeting and it'd be 90% procurement, because organizations thought, oh, this is a supply chain thing. It became supply chain. That was the key word or words. Oh, we got this supply chain. Oh, that sits under procurement. So procurement, I think, kicking and screaming, inherited contingent labor because it's just a commodity and we're just buying things. And they treated it the same way as buying pencils. Mistake number one, but it happened. The last few years, and I think, the latest stat I've seen, which I think might even be a bit conservative, is 60% now sit under HR. I think it's probably close to 70, but that's happening. So as that, and I'll come back to that in a second. So that means now as organizations, so what are procurement looking after? Well, they should be looking after all the procurement solutions, the services procurement, or the SOW work. So now, and that hasn't really had a home in the past, and that's been the challenge, right, for organizations. Most services procurement deals are sold on as a phase 2 of an MSP. We'll come in, we'll get all your stuff all good under control, we'll get visibility, transparency, put some rigor, and then we'll go after that SOW. And that phase 2 either takes too long or sometimes it doesn't even happen. It's a bit Wild West. What we've seen in the last 12 months, the biggest growth has been in that space. And I think a lot of that is because procurement have been able to concentrate on it. So coming back to your question, if you roll that forward, now we've got very clear delineation. Procurement know what they're doing. They're going to want more and more of that spend under control. And as they get more control and visibility of that, some of it's going to be thrown back over to staff org because it isn't really SOW. Some of it's going to be, well, actually, I think we could get a bunch of freelancers to do this for half the cost of paying the service provider. So that's going to have yet another tick growth in the freelance space. And it means over on the HR side, they can now start getting their arms around how they're getting work done with non-employees as well as employees, which means, oh, well, why don't we just blend that? And who knows, we might finally get to what's been called total talent forever. It won't be total because it won't include all that work that's done through services, but it'll be as total as we can get. my hope and desire, and if I had a magic wand, and the advice I give to enterprises is, all of this starts too late. You should have a chief work officer that sits on the board and makes those decisions about how that work's going to get done, by whom, by what form of individual or machine, whereabouts in the world it should sit, and how much we should be paying for it. So that, we're seeing more and more CFOs getting involved now. And a perfect situation, you'd have a chief work officer that's sitting down with CPO, CRO, and CHRO and saying, right, guys, what are we building in the next couple of years? Okay, let's go and have a look and see what's the best way to do that. That means we're going to need this HR, we're going to need that CPO, we're going to need that CFO. That's how much we're going to spend. So to my mind, it just blows my mind that the chief work officer isn't a thing yet. You see a couple of companies that are sort of combining HR, CIO, and CHRO and calling it something, but you've got to start with the work, not the talent.
Can I ask you, Tony, on this? So here's where I wouldn't have said this even a week ago. So next week, who knows, maybe I'll be totally full of crap. But I think there's something happening that actually will enable, to your point, Bruce, whether it's the chief work officer or whatever. But I think part of the reason that HR and contingent, that I have always kind of scoffed at it, is because it just doesn't usually have the power, right? It's delegated as like this and backup, you name it. I think part of the reason for that is if you looked at actual like percentages and composition of the workforce, it was mostly like product marketing engineering teams. So for every one HR person, there's probably 10 to 100 product engineering finance people. I think one thing that I did not expect that we're seeing because of AI is these 100-person marketing teams are going to turn into one marketing person. And these 500-person engineering teams are going to turn into one person. And even Microsoft and Satya came out last week and said, hey, we took this 5-person team required to build product at LinkedIn and we merged it into one role. So now what does that mean? That means that the ratio of employees is just nuked, I would argue, in the best way possible. But so this 500-person teams are turning into one. Now that one person is so important, and those 500 contractors that are supporting that one person are so important. And I think all the gutting of marketing, product, engineering, I think HR should be sitting pretty, because now all of a sudden they have more leverage, value, and power, because what they do is no longer let me walk the person out the building. They're literally driving the most important part of the business. Tony, how full of shit is that? This has ever been towards HR?
Well, I mean, I absolutely think this has evolved. That we've talked about this with a lot of folks, that HR has to evolve to open up to more than just their full-time talent. They need to engage more of the humans that are working with the business. But Bruce, we couldn't agree more. There should be a dedicated role focused on just this. And Matt, I don't know if you remember, we actually, when we started working together a year ago, we had the same conversation, Bruce. And Matt's like, there should be a role, and they should be like the chief flexibility officer. And I was like, I think people misinterpret that, but you're on the right path.
That's the yoga instructor.
I was just going to say, Tony's a yoga instructor.
But we put together, I'll send it to you, Bruce, because I'd love your feedback on this. We put together a draft high-level idea of what we called at the time a workforce ecosystem strategist. And it was someone that, just like you're describing, works cross-functionally. They're focused on just how the work gets done. HR is still focused on resourcing the talent once you've gone through that process. The work is constantly changing, and the demands and objectives of the business are constantly changing. So that's an ongoing role that has to be just as fluid as the talent that you're working with. And they need to have, just as you said, the CFO has to be involved, procurement, legal, to make sure you covered all the risk bases as well. That, I think, is a vital role. And I do think that's something that should grow, whether it grows up underneath procurement or HR or all by itself. It has to, because organizations have to be building their own ecosystem and then figuring out how to maximize or optimize the effectiveness of that ecosystem. And someone that gets everything we're talking about, they read all the books, they know how to speak the language of these different providers, they can have such an influential role in the organization because they can impact every single metric if organizations adapt this. And I think should be an up and coming role within organizations in the future.
Yeah, it should. And I think that come back to your point, Matt, that if you think about those hundreds of positions going into one, then you start talking talent density, I think is the phrase people are using now.
Yeah.
And that one person might earn $1 million. And now if you're CHRO and you've got half a dozen people that are all on $1 million each, who's looking after them? Who's their agent and their coach? That starts changing the world, And I think the other point that we haven't yet mentioned is, so I was in Bangalore week before last and at a SIG conference in a sourcing industry group, an inaugural launch in India. And the keynote was the chief procurement officer of Accenture, Binny, great guy. Love it. And he was explaining that all but 2 of the C-suite positions now sit in India for Accenture. He said, no, I didn't get this job because I'm in India. I got this job because I'm the best guy for it. And I'm in India. But so, this concept of the growth of GCCs and what's happening, this isn't back office stuff anymore. We're seeing enterprises lift and shift their whole global headquarters and all of the big senior C-suite positions into India. So, if companies aren't watching that and tracking that and wondering, what's their strategy for that, they're going to miss out. And I think that, if you add on top of that, $100,000 fee to bring in an H-1B, if we can't bring the people here, you got to send the work to the people. And the good news is you can do that in today's world. We couldn't have done that pre-COVID. But now you don't have to send the people to the work. You don't have to send the people to the work. Yeah, you can send the work to the people. So I think that's another shift we're going to see in terms of how organizations think more globally, looking at the world from Bangalore than they do looking at the world from Palo Alto. You just see the world differently.
Can I tie this, Bruce? So I'm not going to lie, this is one of the biggest contradictions that I feel like I have to live with in our world, and I hate myself for it. And so I'm going to assume, since both of you were strawberry pickers, that, you got a little bit of the American in you, and I'm not going to shy away from, I feel very torn because I think the way the world is going it is global no matter what. When I look at my best teams, it's like 80% outside the US. Then I do look straight and I go, oh no, what is that doing to my community and America as a whole? But I think it's true, right? There's no shying away from this. There's incredible talent all around the world. So easy to access, same time zone, potentially 1/3 the cost, but I think that's a short-sighted view to look only at the cost. But yeah, I got no question there. I just want to call it out. It's something I feel like I'm always dealing with, is I'm like, ooh, am I creating like what we did to manufacturing 10 times worse just for all knowledge work? Which, topic for later. Shelf that. Tony will have to answer that. Then say it nicely.
You just opened up quite a Pandora's box to then
I know.
drop the mic and walk off.
Yeah, I'm out.
I would give Bruce a chance to answer. Yeah, Bruce, what do you think?
Would make one comment specifically for the staffing industry is if people build a recruitment center in India 4 or 5 years ago, typically they would say, well, we got 50 recruiters in US, so we need 100 in India to do the same work. Unfortunately, some companies are still holding on to that bullshit myth. It might have been true 5 years. It's not true now. It's one-on-one. So, then people need to wake up to that, because if their belief is it takes 2 people to do a job, guess what? It'll take 2 people to do a job.
Yeah, you're right.
That's how they're setting targets. That's how they're bonusing. That's how everything. That's how they're being managed. Get over that. We've automated so much of the recruitment process now. It's easier to be as good, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Well, Tony, do you want to give us the final send-off or final question as I just opened up our Pandora's box?
I'm going to say something really controversial, because I've got to decide this, Matt, because you're saying that about America.
Yes, Bruce.
If the country carries on the way it is, we're all going to have to learn to pick strawberries. I'll leave it there.
Fortunately, you two are going to be the best, so I'll get employed by you.
I think that's actually a good place. I mean, Bruce, I guess to summarize, really excited about this new venture, building off of the consulting you're already doing. The experience and leadership you have in this space is so valuable to so many people that are listening that do need that help in navigating growth or trying to grow. And as you said, we've been to the conferences, we've seen the clicks. We know that networking is a really important, valuable part of fitting into this space and being able to influence decisions. Knowing where to go, who to talk to, what to do isn't easy at all. And it's a big investment when you start showing up at those events. So absolutely recommend that people reach out to you and the team. What's the best way for them to get in touch and learn more about not only what you do individually, so share that, but also what the new business.
Yeah, the quickest way while we're building our website is via LinkedIn.
Okay, good. Always. Great place to start. Well, great. Bruce, thanks so much for your time. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, really look forward to hearing more, and we'll probably continue to bump into you at those same events you're just talking about.
I'm sure we will. Look forward to it.
Thanks,
Bruce. Guys.